Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It is time to bring the orange, and I'm thrilled to have in studio our EMEA Field CTO, Patrick Smith. Long time coming. It is great to have you in town.
It's great to be here, Rob. Good to see you.
Yes. Thank you for reaching out and letting me know you're coming into town for our Global Leadership Summit. And we were able to squeeze you into studio to talk about a really hot topic, data sovereignty.
It's a big topic.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah. We're going to get into why that is. Tell everybody just about your time here at Pure, how long you've been here, what you did before, because it's a very interesting transition from what you were leading prior to Pure.
Absolutely. So Field CTO covering the EMEA region, Europe, Middle East and Africa. Been here for unbelievably 7.5 years now. So quite a while.
You're close to me. I'm coming up on 8. Yeah.
Are you really?
Yeah. We're right around the same, right around the same time. Yeah.
First time working for a vendor. My whole experience before Pure was working on the other side of the table, working in financial services for 25 years. So, quite a big change.
Yeah.
Moving over from customer to vendor.
What was very different? You led IT for a number of financial institutions. What was different about the vendor side when you made that leap?
Actually, I think what was really interesting for me, because I'd been a customer of Pure's before I joined Pure, was the lack of surprise in joining Pure. In terms of quite often with companies, you see the view from the outside, and then you see inside, and it's completely different.
It's kind of like the reverse stained glass window thing, right? You see all the pretty colors, and on the outside, it doesn't show up that way at all, right?
And it's very different. But what really struck me about Pure is what you see from the outside is what it's like on the inside in terms of the people, the culture, the products. There was really great consistency there, and that was very refreshing, I think.
What's the average day in the life for you as a field CTO? I'm curious because there has to be equal parts learning and understanding what we're doing, but also what the industry is doing at large, but then also finding time to communicate both to our sales teams that you work with and directly with customers and with partners. There's a lot that goes into that.
It's one of the things that's great about the job is it's a really good balance of spending time talking to customers, talking to potential customers about Pure, about what drives Pure, about why we build things the way we do. And then, as you say, there's a whole lot of learning to be done, not just about what we're doing, but also about what's going on in the industry and across lots of different industries. So that takes up quite a bit of time. There's also providing that conduit, that connection between customers and product management and engineering. What are customers looking for in our products? What do they like about what we do? What do they want us to do next? What new features and functionality they want? So very varied. And then I get to work with the marketing teams, the media teams, press, analysts. So really nice and varied.
We had you up on stage for a number of the recent Accelerate road shows, which were very successful, right? Taking our Accelerate branded program that we do in the summer every year and then cascading it out into the regions. And you spoke on a number of topics, but I feel like the energy at those events was really high. Right?
Yeah, the Accelerate events, as always, across Europe are really strong. I think this year was particularly strong. Lots of customers, lots of potential customers coming along and joining us at Accelerate. Lots of our channel partners there as well. And some really good messaging around enterprise data cloud. And it really resonated with everyone there. So, we were very happy with the European Accelerate.
Yeah, they went really, really well. And you make a great point about enterprise data cloud being this story, this vision that we can now line up behind regardless of what we're bringing to market, regardless of what the solution is. It's really focused solely on what we can deliver for our customers around simplifying the way that they manage data, not managing storage. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It brings everything together. The whole portfolio, the products, the layering of intelligent control plane, that move to the fact that the cloud isn't a place.
Right.
The cloud is a way of working.
Yeah.
And it really, I think, reinforces that.
Well, related to cloud and why we have you in today is we did want to touch on data sovereignty, right? And I think it's been a concept before, but it's really coming to the forefront now, really with the proliferation of the amount of data that is out there, but also that you have these multinational hyperscalers that enterprises are relying on putting their data in. And it starts to raise some interesting questions about the locality, the legality, the security, right? There's all these different aspects about where the data lives. But how would you define data sovereignty or the issues related to data sovereignty, just to level set everybody?
Yeah, it gets really interesting as we look at what it is. So from our view, it's about the fact that data is subject to the laws, governance of the country in which it's created or stored. And so that becomes really important. You mentioned it's a hot topic at the moment.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's been a topic for decades.
Yeah.
In different industries. But now it's rising in visibility and focus. And that's because people are also not just focused about the location of the data. They're also focused on who manages it, who can access it, who controls it. And those are a whole interesting layer that probably a decade, 2 decades ago, we weren't so focused on. But now is a big topic.
Well, we have this whole trend with AI, which is opening up new ways to leverage the data that is there to run training, to run inference. And so that creates even more heightened concern or awareness of how and where the data is located in order to be able to run AI against things.
And you're absolutely right. AI is increasing the visibility and focus on data. But also, I think as citizens, we're all more aware of what data is, what it can tell people about us as individuals, but also in the business world, how valuable data is.
Yeah.
And AI has just sort of turbocharged that.
Yeah.
If you like. And so it means that everybody is more focused on data. And then if you're focused on data, okay, where is it stored? Who can access it? How is it being protected?
Yeah.
And you only actually have to look at the recent cloud provider outages that we've had to reinforce the interconnected world that we're in.
Yeah, it turns out a lot of that data resides in those
suddenly
hyperscalers. Right? There were huge impacts with those
huge
outages.
impact around the world, and suddenly you're saying, why is that service impacted by that cloud outage?
Yeah.
So there have been a set of circumstances that have highlighted the interconnected nature.
I want to hit on some of the trends, and it builds a little on the preface that we just hit. So there's 3 prevailing trends that we're looking at. One being data sensitivity, right? That you kind of touched on. One being this growth and use of public cloud, which has exploded in the last 10 years. And then really interestingly, the geopolitical issues, right? We haven't hit that one yet, but there is this notion that changing winds, right, with politics, with what countries are doing, can create risk and impact. But really, all 3 of those factors come around a risk profile for companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why data sovereignty has been the hot topic, really, since the beginning of the year. And firstly, that focus on data. And one of the other aspects of data is the regulation around data. So in Europe, GDPR, health data with HIPAA, a lot of regulation now around data. And so people are focused on that and making sure that they aren't on the wrong side of regulation. Then you got the rise of the hyperscalers. 20 years ago, the hyperscale environment, the cloud environment, was a novel place to try out ideas. Fast forward to today, for many organizations, it's the de facto place to run their IT services.
It's production. Yeah.
That's it. And we even see organizations that are born in the cloud and have never had their own tech. So the hyperscalers have just become ingrained in every way of working that we have. And then we have the geopolitical world,
It's
which
really
has
interesting. Yeah.
really impacted how organizations think about risk, whether that's risk because of tariffs, whether it's risk because of supply chain, whether it's risk because of potential service disruption. So the geopolitical tension, I think, has really caused businesses to revisit things that they took for granted before.
And those are really interesting because many of them are out of the control of organizations, right? It's not like an enterprise can go dictate policy, right, politically somewhere. So you have to keep up with those and be aware of what those changes are.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a case of reacting to that,
Mm-hmm.
but also reacting to it in understanding what the potential risk is, and then focusing on what you can control. Because as you said, there's lots you can't control.
Sure. Yeah. And it's focusing on what you can. The really exciting aspect of this data sovereignty is we didn't just go blankly and create narratives around that. I mean, we had some prevailing wisdom, but we ran a survey, right, through University of Sydney and got some really interesting findings out of that. And I think the summary, when I looked at the results, does indicate that most organizations are really concerned about this. So while it's always been there, now it's it's very heightened. And while maybe here in the United States, domestically, we don't see it as much with all the regulations that you have in EMEA and that you have in Asia, it's very heightened, which is why we ran this as a topic in our Accelerate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the survey was really interesting because even if organizations might not be doing something about it, it's on their mind. And that's really what the survey heightened. Just throwing a couple of stats out there, 92% of the respondents on the survey indicated that geopolitics was increasing how they focus on data sovereignty and the risk of not doing something about data sovereignty. So that's a pretty resounding number, but even bigger than that, and I'll just read it to make sure I don't get it wrong. 100%. Everybody stated that data sovereignty concerns, including potential service disruptions, have made them reconsider where the data is located. Now, that's a big one because that's everybody thinking, what data have I got and where does it sit and what do I use it for?
And there's implications that come with that because if you know you have to do something, then it requires planning, it requires investment, it requires staffing or looking introspectively, right, at where the data is and potentially having to spend money to go and do something productive.
Yep. And then the last number, 78%, said that they were looking at adopting strategies to consider sovereign capabilities for their data. So that could be sovereign cloud provider, it could be a managed service provider, it could be their own data center, but looking at those alternatives. So
what is then a sovereign cloud provider, right? Different from the multinational? Are we talking about entities actually just creating places to locate data that meet some of these data sovereignty requirements? Like they're specifically designed as a sovereign place where you can meet requirements.
So it's really interesting because for a long time, we've talked about sovereign clouds as being the location. It's a cloud region in Europe or in the UK. And that's worked for many people for a long time. But now people are also looking at who controls that cloud environment. And is that cloud environment run by a foreign company or a national company? And that is what now people are looking at. And so that whole idea of a sovereign cloud environment has changed a little. And it's interesting if you think about how quickly the pace of evolution in this space. So we're sitting here in November.
Yeah.
In October, the European Union launched a cloud sovereignty framework paper, which actually rates cloud and managed service providers based on their sovereignty posture. And so that's really interesting because that provides a scoring of how sovereign you are. And that feels like the first step on providing that transparency and clarity.
Do we expect this will be something that will proliferate globally? Do you expect other regions, countries, collectives to start coming up with their own sovereign frameworks now that we've seen this come out with Europe?
It's a really interesting one. We do tend to see other regions follow.
Okay.
So I especially expect to see Asia Pacific, Japan doing something similar potentially. Because we saw that with GDPR.
Sure. Yeah.
We saw
and that was a lead, right?
GDPR being the first one on citizen data and how to manage and protect it. And then we saw similar regulation put in place around the rest of the world. So yeah, I'd expect something similar to happen.
Yeah, and it is interesting that Europe is always leading these types of initiatives, right? No change there. So what are the options then, right? So I'm sitting here listening or watching to this podcast. I'm scratching my head. We know we need to do something, but really there's a few different paths that organizations can take, which is, well, it ranges from pretend nothing's going to happen, right? Put our head in the sand to maybe over-rotate and do too much to kind of, there's probably a happy middle ground. But talk about the implications of each of those options, right? Relative to inactivity, lots of activity, or finding some easy wins.
So the first one, as you say, is just ignore that this is going on and do nothing.
And that happens. I mean, that truly does.
Absolutely does.
Right?
Because doing something about this, to your point earlier, can be very time consuming, very expensive, very disruptive. And so an organization may look around them and say, well, everyone else is in the same boat as me. I'll just stick with what I've always done. Depending on the business, that may be perfectly good. That may be, you're just fine. But also you need to consider the risk. Because there is a risk associated with doing nothing. At the other end of the spectrum could be, okay, I'm going to bring everything into a sovereign environment. Maybe I'm going to repatriate all my workloads that were in the cloud into my own data center, or into a local in-region managed service provider. Now, that doesn't. If an organization was to do that, that is a huge amount of change, a huge amount of risk. It doesn't come without risk, and so an organization would need to think very carefully about that as well. And then there's the middle ground, which is, okay, I'm going to have an approach that looks at my environment, understands what the risk is, what the requirements are, and host in the appropriate location, facility, service provider. So there's, as you said, from one extreme to the other and everything in between.
And just to advise companies and enterprises that each approach is an approach, right? You can do that, but there's a risk profile that comes with each one of those, depending on what you decide to do or not. And you kind of touched on that, so I'm sitting here again listening. What do we go do? We take that middle ground approach, right? Where we look at changing the locality of some workloads, some data, maybe taking advantage of some sovereign providers. How does one then go and get started in doing that? Because again, the data estate for a lot of these companies is massive.
Yeah, it is.
And is spread out. So it's almost feels like an insurmountable task to jump in and figure out where you can look first.
So for us, the advice we're giving is you need to do a risk assessment. Understand your landscape, your business services, the applications that support those business services, the data that support those business services, and the criticality of those business services. And you need to understand that because you need to know what you've got.
Yeah.
Unless you can understand what you've got, you can't make any decisions or any change. And a lot of that comes down to the age-old topic that comes up again and again at the moment in terms of data governance. We talk about AI. We talk about how to have a successful AI project. You need good data governance to underpin a successful AI project. Talk about data sovereignty. You need to have good data governance to underpin decisions that you're going to take on data sovereignty. And this isn't unlike people in financial services who deal with Europe will be familiar with this because it's just the same approach that they've had to take for some regulation called DORA, which is all about operational resiliency for financial services in Europe. And that's a case of, what have I got? What are my critical services? What's the impact on the business if they're not available? How quickly do I need to be able to recover from them? So a different angle, but effectively the same kind of study.
Interesting. Now, what about the hybrid approach, right? And when I think about a hybrid approach, you're looking more at the workloads and the workflows. What needs to happen to operate the business? Is there a best practice on consideration for certain things that need to move into this hybrid approach? Assuming that we've hit the bar on data governance, right? Because I imagine there's also varying levels of maturity. Yep. With, the financial services have kind of been forced into managing that data governance because of something like DORA or GDPR. But now we look at hybrid, and many people are operating hybrid, but is there a best practice or what you see for what works best well in a hybrid scenario?
Yeah, so I think we've seen a really interesting evolution of the cloud and how people think about the cloud in this decade. And we've seen organizations who maybe were adopted a cloud first strategy at the beginning of the decade, gain real experience of operating in the cloud and evolve that. And so what we've seen for the last few years is organizations really settling down on a hybrid multi-cloud strategy. And so what we expect organizations to do with a data sovereignty lens is making sure that they have sovereign capabilities in their hybrid multi-cloud architecture so that they then are able to run the right business service, the right application in the right location based on the risk profile. And to be able to do that without having to start from scratch from an application architecture and a hosting architecture every time, so that they can simply go to their hybrid multi-cloud architecture and run the application in the right place. And if regulation changes and they need to move it, it's not reinventing the application from the ground up. You can do that in a controlled, managed way.
Use the investment that you've already made in maturing the application services, right, as you move them in. Lastly, on this, we talked a little bit about the rise of these sovereign providers as an alternative. My guess would be that not all providers are created equal, perhaps. So what is your guidance in evaluating sovereign providers? What are best practices, or what are capabilities that a company should look at when they're looking at, okay, we've made a decision, we're going to leverage a sovereign provider in our region, in our country, but how do we pick the right one?
Yes, it's an interesting one. So what we're seeing is, especially in Europe, we're seeing a rise of sovereign providers. And a great example actually is a customer of ours, Beyond.pl, who were at our Accelerate event in Las Vegas, a sovereign AI as a service provider. So that's a great example of somebody who's said, okay, we're going to build out an AI capability for Central Eastern Europe. Sovereign capabilities located in region, operated by staff in region. So that's Beyond.pl, a great example of one of these providers. And then I think that cloud sovereign cloud sovereignty framework I mentioned from the EU is a really interesting one because it has the criteria for sovereign capability. And so if any listeners haven't seen that, it's worth having a Google for that and having a read because it's really interesting.
Yeah, get the guidance on that one for sure. I want to take it back full circle with you because up front we talked a little bit about the framing of the enterprise data cloud and that vision and that strategy for what we can do for our customers. And while we've provided a lot of great backdrop here, and thank you with your expertise on this and explaining some of the data points that we got from the survey, how can we help, right? What can Pure do? What is our vision with the enterprise data cloud? And how does that intersect with the needs for data sovereignty? Because I think now for at least 6 years, right, we've had technology and we've had capabilities that enable us to go in and provide the data services in a cloud environment and enable truly hybrid data management. How does enterprise data cloud play into this, and how can Pure help?
I think there are several aspects to the enterprise data cloud that are become really compelling as you look at delivering sovereign capabilities and sovereign cloud capabilities. Firstly, the cloud isn't a location, it's a way of operating the environment. And the enterprise data cloud is focused on allowing our customers to operate their storage infrastructure like a cloud. Self-service capabilities, extreme levels of automation, big focus on simplicity. And one of the big challenges across the world is getting skilled staff to run and operate these environments. And so if you can have something that's simple, then you don't need specialist staff to the same degree as running a complex environment. Plus, it becomes more reliable.
Yeah.
Because if it's simple, your people are less likely to make a mistake. And reliability is key. You don't want to bring your business services back to a sovereign environment and suddenly find they're less reliable than they were before. That wouldn't be acceptable. And then the other really interesting one, which is a topic that we've been highlighting for quite some time, is the energy efficiency of our platforms.
Absolutely.
Because there are a lot of countries out there who don't have enough energy to run data centers. You read about it in the press all the time, the power and the water demands of running data centers. And so if our customers, whether they're individual organizations or whether they are managed service providers, cloud service providers, being able to run the most energy efficient storage platforms on the planet, help them, because you can no longer just outsource the data center to another country, another region, and make it somebody else's problem providing the power and water. You have to deliver it yourself. And if you're in Spain, you may have lots of renewable energy, but maybe you don't have the water to cool the data centers. And so not everyone is as fortunate as Iceland with geothermal power and lots of water and free air cooling. So it's horses for courses, but and as a power efficient platform for storage and data really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've made some great strides this year with expanding the FlashArray XL platform, right? And consolidation is a real thing there with some of the larger, more power hungry systems that are there. So that's a great consideration, right? To have. I guess lastly, closing it out, let's take a look forward because conditions are always changing in IT, and we know that, and certainly when we add in geopolitical. So from our view and what we captured from the survey and some of the outputs, let's talk about 3 areas for the future that folks should look out for. So we got the emergence of new regulations, which we kind of touched on already.
Changing all the time, and I'm sure there's more to come.
Yeah, more to come. A rebalancing around cloud workloads. We touched on that a little bit. And then this rise of sovereign cloud providers that we hit. So which of those stand out to you as the one that should need to get the most attention?
I think organizations really need to keep track of new regulation, especially if they're in a regulated industry. And there are so many regulated industries. Doesn't matter which
healthcare,
country or
finance,
region in, healthcare,
everything.
Finance, telecommunications. We have in the UK and across Europe, we have the concept of critical national infrastructure that supports the services that citizens depend on. And so they tend to be regulated, and keeping on track of that regulation, because it changes on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I think we're just at the beginning of this journey.
It's an exciting journey, though. It's going to be fun to see how and where this evolves. Let's close it up here with everything we've discussed today. What's an easy win for organizations, whether they've gotten started or whether this is on the roadmap or they're deep into it? From your view and what we captured from the survey data, and certainly feedback that you get anecdotally from all your customer interaction, where would you point people to focus right now today so that they don't fall behind?
It's a great question. And I think the key bit of advice I'd say is don't ignore it.
Aha.
Even if you choose not to do anything about it.
To do nothing strategy, right?
Don't ignore it.
Okay.
Because the big concern is it will bite you if you ignore it. And so understand the domain, understand the changes in the domain and the changing landscape, but don't ignore it.
Okay. Good advice. I love it. Well, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Hashing through this with you, a different topic for the Pure Report. Usually we dive really deep into technology and solutions and other concepts. So it was really nice to kind of turn the page and dig into something that is on everybody's minds, that but that isn't really hardcore storage tech. So I appreciate you reaching out and letting me know you were going to be in town. Where can people find you? You got a LinkedIn profile, I know.
Yep.
Any other plugs for places?
Yep. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm not big on social media, so LinkedIn is the spot. But then also, Rob, you mentioned the report.
Yes.
And listeners can find the report. It's on the Pure Storage website under the resources section. It's an ebook under that section. And hopefully people will find it interesting.
Yeah, and it's a good read. I would say sometimes people are a little bit wary with some of these reports that they're tens and tens of pages. It's pretty tight. It's pretty consumable. I went through it. Really interesting insights that are in there. And again, probably the easiest way for people to find it, just go to the Pure website, click on resources, and then put in data sovereignty, and you will see that come up, and recommend everybody to download that. Also, when we announced the report, we also did a blog and did some press. So there are some other content assets that are out there around this, but ultimately, like everything we do at Pure, we're just here to help, right? We're just trying to help our customers to be successful. So this is another one of those areas. Hey, thanks for coming on today, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Rob.
Super fun. And thank you for listening, watching this episode of the Pure Report. As always, share with friends, share with colleague, and we will keep the great guests like Patrick coming on to the program. And with that, we will wrap for Pure Storage and Patrick Smith. This is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.